Welcome to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM for Tuesday, October 7th. I'm Andrew Walworth, and joining me are RCP President and co-founder Tom Bevan and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. So, guys, Attorney General Pam Bondi is on the Hill today, or was on the Hill, answering a bunch of questions from the Senate, including some about Arctic frost. This was the probe helmed by Jack Smith into the 2020 elections. Yesterday, it was revealed by Chuck Grassley that the FBI had obtained phone records of 8 Republican senators as part of that investigation, as well as Republican House member Mark Kelly. Grassley said this about what he considers a major abuse of power by the FBI. He said, quote, based on the evidence to date, Arctic frost and related weaponization by federal law enforcement under Biden was arguably worse than Watergate. So, Tom, we can talk more about Bondi's day on the Hill in a moment, but let's start with Jack Smith. Is Arctic frost really worse than Watergate?
It might be. I mean, honestly, this is outrageous. The idea that, 8 Republican senators their phone records were looked into. This was initially reported as a wiretap. I'm not sure that's exactly what it was, but nevertheless, Alan Dershowitz, famed attorney, no right-wing knuckle dragger, said that this was a blatant
Unlike
violation.
some people I could name.
Blatant violation of the Constitution. It seems to me, when I first read the story, I was like, we talk about the weaponization of the government. And by the way, it's always Republicans that are spied on, not Democrats. I mean, we saw what happened with when Trump first took office and said that Obama spied on his campaign, and everyone's like, oh, well, it turned out actually they did. So this is outrageous. I think it could very well be worse than Watergate, and a full investigation needs to happen, and apparently is going to happen. I mean, that's what Chuck Grassley is saying. He's going to demand it, and so we'll see where this leads. But the initial blush of this is not good. I mean, this looks like it was dirty pool.
Well, I love the Watergate comparisons because, it seems excessive on its face. My father for years worked at the Washington Post, and he said that he used to say, half kiddingly, that he had a rule of thumb how to determine when somebody was calling, if they were just a nut or if they were actually a whistleblower, a source with a legitimate tip. He'd say, if they called up and said, I have a story that will make Watergate look like a picnic, he could hang up on them safely. Well, I'm not sure that's true anymore. And when you guys mentioned that, Tom, you're a little young to remember, but Andy and I remember Watergate, some of the excesses of it. The Nixon campaign allegedly, put moles in campaigns. Well, that's what the that's what the DNC did to Bernie Sanders. Patrick Gray, the sort of ineffective FBI director, was asked to go through the tax record, do audits on Democrats. Well, this is what the Obama administration routinely did to conservatives, and not just audits, shut them down, denied them, tax exempt status. So some of the excesses of Watergate in today's politics don't look as horrifying as they did at the time. But again, Josh Hawley, I think he was a little bit hysterical what he said. These weren't wiretaps. They weren't listening in on the conversations. I don't know exactly what Jack Smith was doing. We'll find out in the coming days. But I think they were monitoring these Republicans to see if they were coordinating with the White House. Because remember, Jack Smith indicted Donald Trump for, inciting a riot, obstructing justice, interfering with an election, which is sort of not really a statute that we were familiar with. It's not really a statute. And so he was looking for what other Republicans were doing in
conspirators.
Yes. Or conversely, if you read Smith's indictment, and I haven't read it recently, but I read it the whole thing at the time. There were Republicans warning Trump or cautioning Trump at the time, saying this election wasn't stolen from you. There's no evidence of that. And Smith used that counsel against Trump, said he knew what he was doing was wrong. I thought at the time, and I thought that was a dubious exercise really in the law, because it doesn't prove Trump was lying. It proved nothing more than Trump ignored advice he didn't like, didn't like to hear.
What about you, Andy? Are you pro spying?
I tell you,
Is that how it came off,
on
Tom?
elected officials?
yeah,
In this case,
two
only
things.
Republicans.
I would say the Watergate comparison. I'm gonna reserve judgment on that. But I will say that Watergate was pretty bad, Carl. I do remember it, and I think maybe uh, you might be misremembering the plumbers. There was a lot of bad things about Watergate. Let's just put it that way.
You mean breaking in the office of a
Yeah,
Democrat
the Democrat national.
psychiatrist?
Yes, right.
You're not in favor of that?
I think that's a bad look for the. But I would like an investigation into who names these investigations, because they all sound like, either Taylor Swift albums or something. I mean, this one is Arctic Frost, and or it sounds like a lip gloss or something. I don't know. They're why do they Crossfire
Flavor of
Hurricane?
Gatorade. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, who comes up with these and why? Carl, do you know?
Well, the FBI does this. It makes them look like little boys sort of playing at, war.
Yeah,
Supposedly they're classified and supposed to talk about it, but also they're euphemistic in a way. They sound, glamorous or like spy novels, but if you have to call it what it is, we're investigating the form. The Biden administration is investigating the previous administration. The
right.
Republicans were Democrats. That doesn't sound as good. So I think they're looking for some sort of code language that makes it sound like spycraft or,
Yeah.
high level law enforcement.
Well, Tom, I want to talk about Pam Bondi's day on the Hill. Lots of Crossfire Hurricane going on the Hill today. Like the way I did that. This is her in exchange with Senator Dick Durbin, your senator. Here we go.
The word is, and I think it's been confirmed by the White House, they are going to transfer Texas National Guard units to the state of Illinois. What's the rationale for that?
Yeah, Chairman, as you shut down the government, you voted to shut down the government, and you're sitting here, our law enforcement officers aren't being paid. They're out there working to protect you. I wish you loved Chicago as much as you hate President Trump. And currently, the National Guard are on the way to Chicago. If you're not going to protect your citizens, President Trump will.
So, Tom, there was a lot of owning going on.
Do you have the clip of Richard Blumenthal? Do we have that one too?
I don't.
Okay.
Will you join me in supporting that kind of reform?
Senator Blumenthal, I find it so interesting that you didn't bring any of this up during President Biden's administration when he was doing everything to protect Hunter Biden, his son. And I think you just saw what Director Radcliffe just released.
This is an effort to be positive.
If I can finish answering the question, I'm not going to yell over you. I'm not going to get in the gutter with you. I'm not going to be lectured to you about integrity by someone who lied about being in the military just to be elected a senator.
That was even more personal, Tom.
Yeah, I mean,
that was a good one.
So Pam Bondi, these hearings have gotten nasty. I mean,
wait a minute.
particularly.
Let's go ahead and tell people what she said to Blumenthal, Tom. In case
he. I'm thinking back on these hearings used to be much more tame, much more civil, but during the Trump era, and particularly in Trump 2, the rhetoric has gotten, like, the attacks and the grandstanding from, in this case, Democrats, has gotten so personal and outrageous and over the top that the witnesses have responded in kind. I mean, we had Kash Patel screaming at, Adam Schiff, "You're a disgrace." Bobby Kennedy was, given back to every single Democrat who questioned him. And here comes Pam Bondi, and they're just not taking in the shit anymore. I mean, Dick Durbin had his 5-minute opening statement where he basically accused her of all these, crimes. I mean, he was just like, went through list after list of how she had, in just 8 months, had weaponized the Justice Department, and she'd done all these things, and her brother got favorable treatment, and all these things. And then we're supposed to have a civilized hearing after that. I mean, it's something has gone terribly wrong. I don't know how you change it or put that genie back in the bottle, but certainly Pam Bondi came loaded for bear today, and she delivered it. I mean, whenever, these are just two examples, but like I said, she was not taking any shit.
Yeah. Well, the Democrats asked her about a couple things, the Epstein files, of course, and also
course.
about whether Tom Homan had what happened to the $50,000 that Tom Homan allegedly received from FBI agents. She didn't want to talk about either of those things, Carl. So the Democrats were getting their licks in.
Yes, and there's a lot to ask her. There's a lot that, in my opinion, has gone wrong in this Justice Department. And when I say that, I'm using the criterion that Donald Trump ran on when he sought reelection, the weaponizing of the Justice Department. I thought that was a legitimate issue, so did a plurality of the American people. But then they've done the same thing in reverse. A more productive way to hold these hearings, to Tom's point, would be to ask her about this and say, now you've indicted James Comey. You've pretty much done tenfold what you accuse them of doing. And how do you justify that? Just, and let her talk. When Robert Kennedy was there, Robert Kennedy Jr., Tom mentioned that as well. They asked him questions, and I was really interested in the answer. Because and this is a guy, the more you let him talk, the more rope you're giving him. And instead they cut him off. And literally when they asked him questions that need to be asked, but he would start to give an answer that and they would say, "Oh, I am reclaiming my time." And these hearings there's this grandstanding in this case, the Democrats, because they're the out of power party. And now what's happened is the witnesses have decided to just respond in kind. So these aren't really hearings. They're just dueling. And they're not even really debates. They're just sort of dueling insult fests in which
Yeah.
you attack the other person. And so what you're not going to get is any kind of explanation of what they're really doing and why. And in this case, I give you an example. We've talked about this on this show. The Democrats say crime's going down. Republicans say those stats are not real or they're not important. But a senator who asks Bondi, you're going to a city where it seems the leaders of that city have decided to take crime more seriously. They say that they've lowered the murder rates. Why not just offer the help instead of just send troops on the street and then wait for an answer and let them explain? I think that would be much more elucidating and more valuable to the country.
Yeah. Well, I do think that the country wants to hear about the Epstein files, and I think a lot of people want to hear about the
But I don't.
Tom
I'm a
Homan file.
minority there, apparently.
Yeah, you're the only person in America.
Is this another subject that Carl's not going to talk about? So shut it down.
What was the other? What did I say yesterday? Oh, I'm not going to. Greta
Thunberg.
Greta
yeah.
Thunberg and Jeffrey Epstein. Two stories I don't really care about.
Today marks the second anniversary of the horrific massacre by Hamas in Israel when they murdered more than 1,200 people, including 46 Americans. And they abducted another 254 to be held as hostages, and that included 12 Americans as well. Indirect talks about a ceasefire and a return of the remaining hostages continue in Egypt. But we do know that, at least according to the Times of Israel, Hamas released a statement today saying that they called the massacre a glorious day of success and a meaningful turning point in the region. 48 hostages remain in captivity. 20 of those 48 are still believed to be alive. Carl, how are you marking this day?
Are you expected to trust in negotiations people who say that slaughtering 1,200 men, women, and children? The first people killed was a family. The terrorists shot the children in front of their parents, so they had to watch that before they themselves were killed. Celebrate this as a glorious day. How does one expect 2 years later, after the fact, after they've had a chance to think about this, after they've caused, not the idea, thousands of Gazans to be killed, and they think this is a good thing? How are you supposed to trust? How are you supposed to have a negotiation based on trust with people like that? I was struck by that, Andy, and not horrified, but because it's what we expect, but just it's depressing. Meanwhile, the leaders of the United Nations, all the leaders of Western Europe, the people, Macron, some people who've disappointed us in the past, stepped up to the plate and issued condemnations of what Hamas did 2 years ago today and called for the immediate release of the hostages. Some of them, murmured something about a two-state solution, but they rose to the occasion. But the would-be mayor of New York didn't really rise to the occasion, in my estimation. And it reminds me of what he said, when this happened. He kind of celebrated, it's too strong a word, because he expressed regret for the loss of civilian life, but he basically said this was Israel's fault, and
He
cause for the end of
yeah,
the quote occupation. Now, remember, Gaza is not occupied by Israel. They have protective measures, and now we know why. And remember, when we talk about a ceasefire, Andy, and this 20-point plan that President Trump has offered, and Hamas's sort of slow walking response to it, there was a ceasefire in effect on October 2 years ago today, and Hamas it was sneak attack, and they attacked a festival. They killed all these unarmed people, young people dancing, slaughtered them, raped them, kidnapped them. I said yesterday I'd love to be proven wrong about this, but it's hard to imagine how you can negotiate with people like this.
Tom?
I think it's good that in the middle of these negotiations that we are reminded of exactly what took place on this day 2 years ago. I think because I think too quickly, too often, we are distracted from that and we start talking about, other things. And there is a particular reason that we're in the situation that we're in. And it's because, as Carl mentioned, I mean, this attack was so barbaric and so heinous that Israel's response in that country. We talked to Peter Berkowitz about this in his book. Israel was going through a lot of, they had a crisis, a political crisis within their court, and there were a lot of divisions and tensions within Israel, and unfortunately for them, this was a uniting moment and reminded them of the existential threat that Hamas, is to them. And it is a death cult, and has been for, it is in their charter. They want to destroy the state of Israel, and that hasn't changed. And to Carl's point, now we're negotiating, and the European leaders, it's great that they, mouth the right words on this day. But what was it, 2 weeks ago? Some of these Western leaders were also, issuing statements recognizing a Palestinian state, basically rewarding Hamas and the terrorists for, this slaughter. So I think it's good that we get the focus back to where it belongs. Carl mentioned Zoran Mamdani. I mean, again, we're just a few weeks out from that election, and this has been an issue that he has struggled with. And someone dug up his tweet from 24 or 36 hours after the massacre happened 2 years ago, and it was. I mean, when you read it now, at the time he was just some anonymous backbencher, state legislature. Nobody even knew who he was, and now he's days away from becoming the leader of New York City. And his response it's atrocious. I mean, he waves away, says, "Oh, there's going to be loss of life on both sides," and goes into the occupation, which Carl said at that point there was no occupation. I think it's puts in stark relief the issue that is that's been, if anything, hampering his campaign. I mean, it's not going to keep him from winning, apparently, but that's a reason that I think a lot of Jews in New York are worried about him as being the leader of that city.
Yeah. The Washington Post had an interesting piece, which I saw today. I sent it to you guys. I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at it, but there's a study that shows that on TikTok, Palestinian content compared to pro-Israel content, for every pro-Israel post on the app in September, there were 17 pro-Palestinian ones. According to
that seemed low to me, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't do TikTok, but
when you think about like all of the young people that are on TikTok, I actually thought that was, it's still terrible, but it's less terrible than I thought.
Not to mention the Chinese, bot farms and Russian disinformation operation.
But my question is, and it relates back to the Mamdani, especially among young people. I mean, does this explain or help to explain, in your view, sort of the turn that we're seeing in U.S. public opinion, but especially among young people, against Israel. When they all get their news from social media. This is what they're being fed on a daily basis.
Well, not just from TikTok, Andy, from Hollywood stars, from
Professors on
some
college campuses.
professors on college campuses, the whole the intelligentsia of Europe. This is the idea that you could oppose a Jewish state, one tiny country in a sea of the Mideast and a sea of the world. And are they teaching the Holocaust anymore in school? You wonder. And we just these people are these professors. They come up. The latest ones from Rutgers, say this most hateful, sinister, dishonest things about history. We've allowed a generation of not just Americans but Brits, French to be propagandized against Jewish people, against Israel, in favor of this this minority Arabs in Palestine, and it's come home to roost. And this is not going to be an easy problem to eradicate. There was a piece in the Free Press about how Israel won the war, but the West keeps ceding territory, I mean, intellectual territory.
Back to these peace talks though for a minute, because it was reported today that Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are departing today for Egypt. They will arrive Wednesday. They will participate in these indirect talks in some fashion. Also, the Israeli Minister of Strategic Affairs, Ron Dermer, is going to join the talks as well. Tom, does that give you any hope? Does it look like there might be some progress here?
Well, I'm in the same place I was yesterday, which is, sort of cautiously optimistic. There are signs that we have a little bit more momentum than we've had in some time to get a deal done, at least on the surface. But again, the idea that Hamas is going to lay down their arms and just suddenly, give up their hatred and their desire to kill Jews and destroy the state of Israel seems unlikely.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'm still cautiously optimistic, but man, this is a tough problem to solve. If it were, we've been working on this problem for decades and no one has been able to solve it. If they do manage to get this worked out, it will be a remarkable point in human history.
Yeah.
The one thing, Andy, let me add to that might change the equation. What we're talking about, both what you and Tom talking about peace talks, what I was talking about is the poisoning of the minds of a whole generation of people in the West. We're told this is a genocide, brought on by starvation and bombing. So you're offered, it's not a genocide, but you're offered to stop all the violence, to stop the genocide. But what you have to do is return hostages, by the way, and you get 10 times as many hostages, convicted murderers in return, and lay down your arms. If you're not willing to do that, well, then is it really a genocide? And if so, who's causing it? And if Hamas refuses to do this, what I'm wondering is whether the tide will start to turn in public opinion, because it will be clear then who wants the violence and who doesn't.
But Carl, it's been clear for years. I mean, they've broken every ceasefire.
It's clear,
why is this going to be any different?
It's been clear to me.
It's been clear to everybody who's paying attention.
Because you'll have Tom, because you'll have all these Arab governments saying this. You'll have you'll have some of these college professors. You'll smoke out some of these people and say, wait, what are you saying, Tom? There's no hope at all.
I'm saying you're being naive. I think.
Well, I don't think I'm being naive at all. I think you're being naive to think Jared Kushner and this Witkoff could solve this problem. But what I'm saying is that if you think nothing can happen, then let's just talk about something else. But if you
always accuse me of being Eeyore, so I'm just,
what I'm saying is that I think this is going to lay bare. I think Hamas is going to be smoked out a little bit here.
It'll never
work. I think people in Gaza, ordinary Gazans, are going to start to notice, are going to start to speak out, and actually are already.
I would be curious what happens with the hostages, because it seems to me that if they were to release the living hostages, they might not have to lay down their arms. Because it's really not just lay down your arms. They want them to sort of disarm. There
That's
might
part of
Obviously,
that's
if they don't,
Trump's, that's the
if they
plan,
don't,
right?
the hostage
Right.
releasing the hostages is sort of the first hurdle to clear. And
Yes.
if they don't do that and they can't do that,
Right.
everything else is obviously
That's what I'm
dead.
saying. That's why I'm focused on the release of the hostages.
But then we're back to square one. That doesn't solve anything.
But
Well,
it is, I mentioned this article in the
I
Wall
mean,
Street
it does
Journal.
for their families. That I'd
Yeah.
be very happy for them, but that doesn't solve the Mideast process problem if they just release the hostages and then you're back where you were on October 6, 2023,
well,
with
it
them
would
planning
be-
another attack.
It would be nice, Carl, if you mentioned there was this groundswell among sort of average Palestinians, and I mentioned this piece in the Wall Street Journal, which gave me some hope that these folks said Trump's peace plan isn't great, but it's all we got, and they're weary and they're tired of war and they want to stop. It would be nice. I mean, that if that sentiment takes hold, but again, I'm so skeptical because the Palestinians are the one, they voted in Hamas in free elections, and their kids have been indoctrinated with Jew hatred from kindergarten. I mean, you see some of these kids and the hatred that they spout. It's like that just can't. Doesn't seem to me that's something that can just you can flip off like a light switch and suddenly the Palestinians are all going to be like yeah, this has been a failed experiment for the last 20 years, and now we want peace, and we're willing to live side by side with Israel. They have ingested all this propaganda. They don't know anything else other than to hate Israel and hate the Jews and want to kill them.
well, on that hopeful note, we're going to take a break. You're
Sorry.
listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM, where Tom is hopeful about the Middle East and Carl is not. Jay Jones, who is running for Attorney General in Virginia, is still in hot water over these private texts from 2022, where he compared Todd Gilbert, who was, I think, the Speaker of the Virginia Senate at the time. He compared him to Adolf Hitler and to Pol Pot unfavorably, I might add. He also said he thought Gilbert and his wife should have to watch their children die, and he called them fascists, the children, that is. So we talked about this yesterday, but Democrats seem to be standing by him, including both of Virginia's senators and the Democratic candidate for governor, Abigail Spanberger. Tom, we speculated yesterday that he might not survive 24 hours. I think you and I both thought that, but he's still standing. What do you make of his chances 24 hours later?
I underestimated the depravity of the Democrats in Virginia. Tim Kaine actually came out and said, well, these texts are beyond the pale, but I'm standing by him because these are just texts and I've known him for 25 years. And someone pointed out on X that so Tim Kaine knew Jay Jones when he was 11 years old. That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, there's a phone conversation that apparently was related in 2020 to another Republican legislator, where Jay Jones said that he wished that if more police died, then maybe that would prevent them from, shooting people and killing people. So that was that was something that he thought would be a good thing if more police died. Now he denies that conversation took place, but the legislator this is not anonymous. And the question is, well,
Kind of sounds like the guy, doesn't it?
yeah, I was gonna say, like, does he really does anybody really believe him at this point when he denies something that now sounds like it's in character for him? So, but again, there doesn't seem to be any other sort of movement against him by, there was a story in Axios that says that this has thrown Democrats in Virginia into crisis. Well, not enough of a crisis to try and force him out of the race, because Abigail Spanberger hasn't done that, and neither have any of the other Democrats in Virginia or nationally for that matter. So looks like maybe he will survive this, and who knows? He might end up winning. I mean, I saw a report, someone had said they talked to some people who were early voting. They knew about the text and they simply did not care. And so unfortunately, that might be the place that we're in our politics these days.
Yeah. There's this Washington Post poll I saw. It's got it's a 51 to 45%. This is before the text came out, but 51 to 45%. He's winning the race for Attorney General, tighter than the governor's race in the same poll. It was a 12-point lead for the Democrat in the Washington Post poll. But Carl, just walk me through this. What should they do? And if they did ask him to drop out of the race, are they just ceding that office, or do they have time to run someone else? Or, I mean, early voting started 6 weeks before the election.
Yeah, you could call for write-in votes. This is the problem. Asking this guy to drop out is saying you're going to give the job to the Republicans. They don't want to do that. Should they do it ethically? I'd make that case. But this early voting thing, we mentioned this yesterday. We've had these other things. Remember in the Fetterman race, they had all these early voting, and guy had a stroke, and half the people in the state didn't even know about it. Now Fetterman's proven to be a very interesting senator and very independent minded, but this early voting is a problem. And a campaign always had, a beginning, a middle, and an end. There was a kind of an ethos to it, and we've taken that away. And so early voting is essentially saying, we know most of the people just vote because of the D or the R, and we want to make it easy for our team. It's not really a referendum. It's not really, it's as far from the early, New England model of the town hall as you can get. And, I'm harking back to those periods, the pre-revolutionary period, because this is the 250th, anniversary, and we've got a poll story coming out on that and other coverage. But this is just saying, no, we have to get our people to the polls, and it takes all the discernment out of it. You don't have to be of high character. You don't have to be of high caliber. You don't have to have accomplished anything. You just have to have that D or that R. It's what's wrong with our politics, in my view. But this is an argument why we should have, Tom and I have talked about this. We've got very fanciful ideas, 3-day voting begins on Saturday, ends Tuesday night. You could have bonfires and rallies. You could have picnics. You could actually encourage the political parties to celebrate what unites us. You could have dueling picnics, not fist fights and gunfire, and it could be something that brings Americans together, this exercise of voting. Instead, we've made it, mechanical, by mail. You reach into the house with poisonous ads. Both parties do it, and and this is the end result. You get some person like this who's proven himself unfit to hold office. That's just
it does make you wonder: is there any line now that can be drawn? Is there any
I don't want to hear
in which,
Tom? That's a good point. I don't want to hear a Democrat whine to me anymore about Donald Trump with that stupid thing he said. I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and they'd still vote for me if they're going to go vote for this guy, Jay Johns, because that's the rhetorical counterpoint. And he really,
I mean, you remember Ralph?
It's a much uglier statement.
You remember Ralph Northam was in blackface and his.
Yeah.
If you thought something would end somebody's political career, be a white dude in blackface, at a costume party or something, and that didn't matter. I don't know.
And then he lied about it too. So it was.
And he lied about it. I mean, so I just don't know what it takes to be disqualified from running for office these days.
Well, Joe Scarborough has said that he should withdraw. So there are Democrats.
To his credit.
Yeah, he's not a Democrat. He claims he's not a Democrat. But to his credit, he's called for him to withdraw. I've also seen people though defend this because they say, "Hey, it was a private text. It was not
a public
text." That's the defense.
Andy,
you don't buy it?
No, but Andy, what makes that better? It shows what he's like. I mean, and here we taled about this.
So he's two-faced too.
Well, how many other texts are like this? How many comments makes you think this is who this person is? Well, nobody knew anything about him before. Now we know what he's like, and and he says, I read that and I was ashamed. That wasn't his first response. His first response was to attack Donald Trump. They're using this against me. These leakers, these dirty tricksters. if that's your first impression of a person, it's not a good one. And there was this other, you mentioned this other thing that he denies about saying more police would die. So, I think my guess is other stuff's going to come out between now and election day. The question is, what, as Tom and you point out, will it matter?
Yeah. Well, I think that the other thing about the text, frankly, is that, I mean, you did text it to a Republican. I mean, the idea that you
Well,
would,
there's some question that if he knew if that was a mistake, but then she called him on the phone and he
right.
doubled down on it. He said, "Yeah, this is really how I
Oh, I
feel."
see that he
Yeah.
texted her by accident.
Well, I've heard she was a person he texted with because they had worked together. She's a moderate Republican, but I'm not sure he meant to text her with that. But then when she confronted him with it, he said, "Yeah, that's
Yeah.
how he feels."
Well, the bottom line is you never put anything in a text or an email that you don't want on the front page
Well, how
of the
about
New York
just don't
Times.
be
That's
how
what I
just
was
don't,
always taught.
yeah, but how about just not being a hateful, murderous person?
Yes, I'm caveating that if you were a hateful,
How about
murderous
that?
person and you were running for public office, maybe
Try and hide it.
try to hide it a little better. Guys, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Real Clear Politics. When we come back, Phil Wegmann will be here with me, Tom Bevan, and Carl Cannon. I'm Andrew Walworth. Be back right after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics. I'm Andrew Walworth with Carl Cannon and Tom Bevan, and we're joined now by our colleague, Phil Wegmann, RCP White House correspondent. Phil, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me, Andy.
So, Phil, you have a piece out today on RCP about how the CIA buried an intelligence report concerning Ukraine, and that they did it because it would have embarrassed then Vice President Joe Biden. So tell us about this story and what you learned.
So rewind to December of 2015, then Vice President Joe Biden takes this trip to Ukraine. Ukraine is squarely in his portfolio. And what we discovered through these recently declassified documents is that the Ukrainians were unimpressed. They thought he was going to go over there and he was going to meet with the Poroshenko administration, identify specific areas of improvement for them. Instead, the analysis that the CIA picked up on was that members of the Ukrainian government were bewildered that Biden just delivered a generic speech and then got out of Dodge. And the other thing that the CIA picked up on was that there was a belief within the Poroshenko administration that the reason why Biden didn't give them more of a hard sell is because of U.S. media scrutiny of his own family's overseas business dealings in that country. The scandal here really is when in February 10th of 2016, Biden's team specifically requests that intelligence not be included and not be disseminated in the presidential daily brief. This is a very rare thing that a politician would bigfoot the intelligence community and ask for an intelligence product not to be distributed.
Well, there's something else there, Phil, too. When the scandal erupted about you, when the United States, Ukraine became sort of a Democrat. If you're a Democrat, you're rooting for Ukraine, and Trump and MAGA people start saying kind things about Russia, and you got to go back to the 1930s to hear anything like it. The Ukraine policy became partisan in this country, and what Republicans said was that Biden had gone over there ostensibly to promote American ideals of transparency and good government, but actually he was really trying to quash an investigation into Burisma because his son was getting millions of dollars being paid to be on their board. This was dismissed in the legacy media and by all Democrats as a conspiracy theory and just abject nuttery. Except now we know the CIA. It's what the Ukrainians themselves thought, and the CIA prepared a report documenting this, and Biden himself, his office, was able to squelch the report.
Yeah, the expectation of the Ukrainians was that Biden was going to do exactly that he was going to say Viktor Shchomkin, then the top prosecutor over there, needed to go. But what's interesting about this is he didn't give them the hard sell when he was in Ukraine. He didn't make a specific ask. And to your point, I mean, this was front and center in the 2020 presidential election, where you had Republicans saying that Biden was using foreign policy to advance the interest of his own family, that he was defending his son. Democrats were saying, no, Biden was only pressuring this prosecutor because the international community wanted his ouster and he himself was corrupt. What I find, so on brand here is that Biden kind of didn't do either, at least during this trip. He bragged about it later during these now famous remarks at the Council of Foreign Relations, where he said that he told the Ukrainians that they had 6 hours to fire the prosecutor or they weren't going to get $1 billion in U.S. aid. Well, that's not exactly what happened. Instead, he returned to the United States without making the hard sell. And what we discovered, we took a closer look at the timeline here. On February 10th, that's when his office requests that the CIA bury this report. Then on February 11th, all of a sudden, that's when Biden gets back on the phone with Ukrainians to discuss, among other things, corruption. Perhaps the former vice president did that because he realized that he had work left to be undone.
Can I ask a question real quick? How did Biden find out that there was this unflattering report that he was then able to squash? I mean, that seems like, that seems unusual that he would get a heads up. How many times does this happen in government where, the intelligence community is supposed to be producing these, they happen all the time, as you mentioned in the story, Phil, these after action reports. I wonder, is everybody getting heads up, and are other people able to squash these reports, or was this just specifically just so happened that the vice president's office got a heads up on this?
There's so much that we still don't know. The senior CIA official who walked us through this was unable to say whether or not this information made it to Obama's desk, what the process looked like. These documents were just recently discovered, I was told, and are only now being declassified. But I think that we get a bit of a hint at what the protocol might have looked like in the subject line of one of the emails from the then Obama-Biden administration to the CIA. The subject line was OVP report query. They were clearly, the office of the vice president was clearly looking into what this report was going to say. They had gotten a heads up that there might be some unflattering things in this report that would have made its way into the presidential daily briefing. It was a PDB briefer. A lot of this report was, and a lot of the emails were heavily redacted, but we do know that it was someone involved in putting together the president's daily brief. And so perhaps it was Biden and his team worried that this would embarrass him in front of the boss, and they wanted it to be left out. But, I was told this was valuable intelligence. The career guys were of the opinion that, knowing what senior Ukrainian officials thought of the visit was something that policymakers here in the United States should know. And it seems, based off of the emails that we discovered and then the report itself, that there was an effort to make certain that they did not.
Is there any insight into why this is coming out now?
Yeah, so I pressed my sources on this. Why is it that suddenly this information, which makes the current president's former rival look rather inept, why is that coming to light? And I was told that this is because CIA Director John Ratcliffe is focused on transparency, that they want to turn over a new leaf at the CIA, and that this is an example, to Tom's point, of what they saw as weaponized intelligence. It is outside of the norm for a politician to interfere in the normal nuts and bolts of intelligence gathering, certainly, burying a report. They want to make certain that this does not happen. And so that's why they felt the need to declassify it. It does create a new standard, though, that they're going to have to live by, because if 5 years from now we suddenly discover that the Trump administration buried an
I'm sure Donald Trump would never squash a report that painted him in an unflattering light. That would
exactly. So, but just like the presidential daily brief, these type of behind the scenes emails don't often come to light. So it's a new standard, but perhaps we'll never have evidence to see whether it's followed.
All right. Well, it's great reporting. It's on the front page of RCP today. I commend it to you. It's by Phil Wegmann, who's here with us. I'm Andrew Walworth. I've got Carl Cannon, Tom Bevan with me. And as I said, Phil Wegmann's with us as well. And that's our program for today. Now, tomorrow's Wednesday. We will not be on XM, but we will be on the apps and we are on YouTube. So you can find us there. We hope to see you then.
Follow, subscribe, drop a comment.
There you go. Like, follow, subscribe, and drop a comment. I'm Andrew Walworth. See you tomorrow.